A lot of people said that Joe Biden's opening debut was a little bit dark, rebuking President Trump, for example, over Charlottesville while announcing his run for president, striking a somewhat ominous tone. See what you think.
That's when we heard the words of the President of the United States that stunned the world and shocked the conscience of this nation. He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides. Very fine people on both sides? With those words, the President of the United States assigned a moral equivalence between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it. And in that moment, I knew the threat to this nation was unlike any I had ever seen in my lifetime.
All right, a bit ominous, a bit dark, maybe justified to some people, but maybe for a presidential campaign pronouncement and coming out the gate, a little too dark when you compare it to past presidents, including John F. Kennedy and Ronald Reagan, even Barack Obama, who all had a, well, much more upbeat approach. Take a look.
I am today announcing my candidacy for the presidency of the United States. The presidency is the most powerful office in the free world. Through its leadership can come a more vital life for all of our people.
I'm here because it is the home of Democrats, because I believe today that in this country there are millions of Democrats who are just as unhappy with the way things are as all the rest of us are.
That is why, in the shadow of the old state capitol, where Lincoln once called on a house divided to stand together, where common hopes and common dreams still live, I stand before you today to announce my candidacy for President of the United States of America.
Well, those are the good old days, right? When we had only 3 or 4, maybe tops 5 people running for president from the same party. That was that. It's a very crowded field now. Did Joe Biden, with 19 others in the race, muddy the waters or distinguish himself with some of those comments? Let's get the read from former Republican presidential candidate Steve Forbes, Democratic strategist Nathan Rubin, and our own Kat Timpf. Kat, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I could not agree with you more that it was a very dark and ominous message. He's connected with Obama because he was his vice president, but Obama was saying hope and change, and this is more fear and dread. Obama had a more message of imagine what could happen in the future we could have if I were president, and this is him saying there won't be a future if me or a Democrat is not president. And that's interesting to me because in 2016, the Democrats, Hillary Clinton, her campaign, made things about attacking Trump and the doom and gloom situation if Trump were to be elected, and they didn't win. And it seems like Joe Biden's announcement, at least, was doing the same thing.
We should stress that there were some uplifting, pieces of video and photographs in that piece, but I think as far as coming out the gate, Nathan, seeing as the vice president at the time was very critical of let's say, Donald Trump's inaugural address, deemed it dark and a little bit too much so. It just seemed to be a clumsy way to get off. What do you think?
Well, I think you're absolutely right to point out that historically past presidential candidates have chosen optimism, and like you said, they were successful. But I also think Joe Biden has a point when he's trying to paint such a bleak picture of the current state of politics. When you look at what's actually going on in terms of judicial independence, congressional checks and balances, the idea that Congress should have oversight over the executive branch, this current administration doesn't necessarily believe in those items. So to say that,
but it takes 2 to tango too, right? I mean, I guess, Steve, what I'm asking you is just the message alone. Ronald Reagan, of course, went after Jimmy Carter and his stewardship of the economy and the malaise thing and all. But of course, there in his Statue of Liberty announcement, when the fall campaign kicked off, he was trying to say, I think we can return to higher angels, better angels, and all of that. Should that have been the theme here, or does it differ depending on the times?
No, I think Biden made a huge mistake. I think it's a classic case, Neil. He's running 4 years too late, like Elizabeth Warren. If they'd run in 2016, I think both of them would have had a shot, not only winning the nomination, but certainly Biden winning the general election. But people want to hope for the future. They know things are bad now. A lot of people feel that the president isn't up to the office and all that kind of thing. But Biden is being the senior candidate. When the senior candidate's there, should say, I've seen a lot, we're going to come out of it, here's how.
Well, it's also galvanizing your base, right? The galvanizing the base, I think, and to Nathan's point, this hits home with them. This is their dissatisfaction with Donald Trump and his stewardship, and that this is going to be a different guy in charge.
Right, absolutely. And there are people out there, you see articles all the time about people who are really stressed out or struggling with anxiety when they think about the fact that Trump is president. And we haven't really seen that kind of thing with any other president before, where it's people are saying they're going to therapists because of who the president is. But I still think that it should have been a little more inspirational and trying to inspire people than trying to just make people afraid, which is clearly what he was going for. If Democrats don't win, the future of the country is fundamentally changed. That's a pretty extreme thing to say.
You know, it's interesting that we're also learning that Biden today had called Anita Hill, of course, a range of charges against Clarence Thomas, to say that he regretted how she had to endure the Clarence Thomas hearings. He's trying to make right from past incidents that are controversial with the Me Too movement and some members of the party. Is that going to work? Is this tone, for example, to say this guy, President Trump, is a problem? I'm not going to be that problem. I will acknowledge a mistake, or are we getting too convoluted here?
Well, I think one of the assets that the Obama campaign looked at in 2008 was his long history in Congress and the Senate, but now it's almost looking like a liability. When you look at the 1991 Anita Hill hearings or the 1994 crime bill, or even in 1996 when he voted against same-sex marriage, the progressives, the base of the Democratic Party, are looking at his history and saying, wait a second, is that who I want to lead us into the future? And a lot of people are having second thoughts.
Does that rule out white males, especially older white males in this party?
I don't know if it rules out white males. I think Mayor Pete Buttigieg, to your point, Steve, is really striking an optimistic tone in that kind of generational divide where he's saying, I can lead us into a new progressive era. That has a lot of clout, I think, with a lot of people.
But, you know, Steve, you think about it, it's not as if President Trump is a cockeyed optimist. He spends a great deal of time, you know, grilling his opponents and just saying, you know, what he did even today about Joe Biden. That's hardly positive, uplifting, or even presidential.
He there was attacking an opponent. And I think when the campaign really gets underway, you're going to see a very different tone. Do you want to go back to the sluggishness of the past 10 years or the
But do you think the personal swipes have any point in a campaign?
I think anything can be overdone. Okay. And in terms of Biden, though, given his age, he's got to turn that into an asset. And that's where he's got to make the case. Why am I better than all of these others? Young people, optimistic people. What do I bring to the table, other than I've been around a while, that should make you trust me?
Guys, is it Biden's nomination to lose? What do you think?
I think it's really hard to tell at the beginning. He does have a larger share of the votes in polls, but that share shrinks when there's an undecided option added. A lot of the polls where he has the largest lead, there's no undecided option, so it could just be name recognition for
Nathan,
a lot of people.
I do not think it's his to lose. I think he needs to prove himself to the base of the Democratic Party. This is a primary, not a general.
You're right, Steve.
And because of the proportional representation they're now having on delegates, everyone's going to be a factor in that convention. Unless he wins decisively at the beginning, he's going to get crushed at the convention. He'll never survive a second.
All right. And math says it could be multiple votes. It won't be a first ballot, right?
Yep.
That'd be kind of cool, right?
For journalists.
Just for drama.
Yeah, it depends.
All right, I love drama here. All right, in the meantime, former Attorney General Jeff Sessions is not the only one saying, you know, it's time to move on from the Mueller report. Now some prominent Democrats are saying the exact same thing. Stick around.